Nerdrotic.com.
The fact that CNN decided to jump into the Fandom Menace Disney Star Wars debate in the 11th hour is expected and still laughable, considering that Brian Lowry probably considers himself a journalist and all he did was copy and paste the last 15 or 20 articles that have come out on this debate over the last 2 years. Unfortunately, this article is going to sound very familiar, but I got to keep a promise I made a long time ago. Every single time the access or the mainstream media takes a shot at fans, I will be here to retort. But before I get started, if you enjoy what I do and you like independent content on YouTube, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking and sharing the videos. This helps yours truly and your favorite YouTuber stay competitive against the giant corporations like CNN that YouTube is prioritizing on this platform. If you've come across this video and you find yourself unsubscribed, don't be surprised because YouTube is currently unsubscribing people from my channel, and I know I'm not the only one this is happening to. I do apologize having to ask you for so much, but that is the game, and it keeps me around to call out CNN when they call out Star Wars fans. This comes to us from nerd aficionado and party animal Brian Lowry from CNN. The rise of Skywalker takes flight after the rise of the Star Wars trolls. Star Wars has always enjoyed a long bond with fans, which has become one of its defining features. Yet, as the Fall of Skywalker brings the original saga to a close, no, it doesn't, it brings the Disney Star Wars trilogy to a close, the rise of trolls threatens to fundamentally change that relationship. That relationship was fundamentally changed by you in the mainstream media, the little kiddie table that is the access media, and by Disney Star Wars themselves, Lucasfilm. The backlash against The Last Jedi, the 8th movie in this particular series, no, actually the 2nd movie in the Disney trilogy, again, turned inordinately vitriolic. While there are legitimate questions about how representative those voices are, and indeed what role Russian trolls and political provocateurs played in dragging the comments into the sewer, I'm a little surprised he didn't start out with Kelly Marie Tran, but I guess some of his predecessors have done that in the last couple of days, so he decided to go to the old Russian troll narrative, which we will get to later in this article. The cacophony from social media has at times made it easier to simply tune out those voices rather than engage them. Why don't you tune them out? But I know the answer, and so do you, Brian Lowry. Why tune them out when you can craft a false narrative to attack fans and maybe earn some favor with that big Disney corporation? Here comes his qualifier. It's worth noting that this appraisal comes from someone who harbored plenty of misgivings about The Last Jedi, in contrast to much of the critical establishment. Some of the reasoned complaints about the film and the choices made by writer-director Rian Johnson to these ears made perfect sense, and we have heard this quite a bit from the articles that have been coming out. Even the people who are trying to defend Disney Star Wars hated The Last Jedi. The tone, however, became absurdly ugly. It certainly did from the access media and the mainstream media, lashing out in ways that exhibited a loss of perspective. Again, I agree if you're talking about the access media and the mainstream media, forgetting that this is a fantasy controlled by a major corporation, kind of like this article. They're to be enjoyed, debated, or disappointed about as such. Exactly. That is what's going on here. It's called fandom. This is what we do, Brian. You might not be familiar with it, and you are so late to this argument, I'm not even going to bother explaining it to you. But one over which no fan can claim personal ownership, however much time, money, and energy they invest in it. You're right on both accounts, Brian. Disney owns Star Wars and they don't care about fan investment, but they should. Allow me to nerdsplain to you because that was one of the most ignorant statements you made within an article full of ignorant statements. Fan investment is why Star Wars still exists. Fan investment is why Disney paid $4 billion for that property. And guess what? If these franchise overlords want to have any franchises to overlord over in the future, they better start respecting fan investment pretty damn soon. And I highly doubt Disney paid that much money for a Star Wars with an expiration date. Johnson said then, and more recently in a GQ interview, that such voices represent a small subset of the overall pool. Oh, here we go. We're just a small, loud, vocal minority of YouTubers and people on Twitter that number in the thousands, maybe in the millions. We're not sure. If you start adding up some of those clicks on all of those YouTube videos, that's a pretty big number. Writing in Esquire last year, Matt Miller lamented that a loud section of Star Wars fans have become tragically synonymous with hate and bigotry, which is an outright lie, Brian. And if you had cared enough to do any research, you would know that, but you did not care enough to do that. You just wanted to perpetuate the divisive narrative that the mainstream media now and the access media have been doing for a long time. We're just a couple of days out from the Fall of Skywalker, and I think the timing of this article was perfect. I think this serves as a great reminder of what the Fandom Menace has gone through over the last couple of years and why the Fandom Menace has grown, because of the lies, because of the accusations, and more people every day are seeing through this. And I want you to keep all of this in mind as you go see The Rise of Palpatine. I told you we'd get to this. The Russian Trolls, a study by Morton Bay, a research fellow at USC's Annenberg School for Communication, which I'm sure didn't receive a grant from Disney, examined social media and found evidence of deliberate, organized political influence measures disguised as fan arguments about The Last Jedi, in much the way outside elements have sought to further polarize political discourse. To use one of those pretentious, douchey access media and mainstream media terms, there is a lot to unpack here. We'll start with the Russian Trolls, since this has been brought up in 3 new articles within the last week, and it all comes from a research paper from USC over a year ago titled Weaponizing the Haters, The Last Jedi and the Strategic Politicization of Pop Culture Through Social Media Manipulation. As most of you may know, information manipulation is done through projection. This is done in politics. When one political party is being accused of one thing, they will have an article written or a paper written accusing the other party of the same thing they are being accused of. You can easily find this paper by Googling it, or the 50 some odd articles that were written the second after this paper hit the internet, because it provided the access media and the mainstream media with everything they needed. But let's get a little context here. I will read you a portion of Morton Bay's abstract section from his paper. Specifically, the study examines a collection of tweets relating to a much publicized fan dispute over the Star Wars franchise film Episode 8, The Last Jedi. The study finds evidence of deliberate, organized political influence measures disguised as fan arguments. The likely objective of these measures is increasing media coverage of the fandom conflict. This almost sounds like exactly what the mainstream media and the access media have been doing over the last 2 years. Strange, isn't it? Thereby adding to and further propagating a narrative of widespread discord and dysfunction in American society. So if you're keeping score at home, there are people in Russia who want to hurt the Disney Star Wars franchise to promote discourse in America. I'm not saying Morton Bay is being dishonest with this paper. I think he truly wants to believe that there are evil Russians out there who want to bring down Disney Star Wars. This brings us back to Brian Lowry from CNN. I don't want to question his honesty or his intent or his motivation, but he didn't link to this paper, and he also didn't link to the CNET article which debunked it, because the entire paper by USC's Morton Bay was based on 1,273 tweets at Ryan Johnson. From the CNET article, Bay collected 1,273 tweets using Twitter's advanced search function, all of which were tweeted to Rian Johnson's account over a 7-month period post-release. After cleaning the dataset, Bay finished with 967 tweets. He then manually determined whether a tweet was negative, positive, or neutral, ultimately deciding the sentiment of any particular tweet was left up to Bay. Of the 967 tweets analyzed, 206 expressed a negative sentiment toward the film and its director. Of the 206 negative comments, 61 were real people reported to have a political agenda. 11 were bots, and only 33 appeared to be trolls. Of those 33, just 16 appeared to possess characteristics consistent with Russian troll accounts. In reality, less than 1 in 10 tweets were from Russian trolls, nowhere near the 50% being widely reported. The Russian troll bot narrative has been out there for 2 years? And this is based on 16 tweets. What is more likely? 16 anonymous Russians have that much influence over the Star Wars fandom and American discourse? Or is a giant billion-dollar corporation possibly coordinating things? You can rework Morton Bay's headline for his paper. Weaponizing the shills, The Last Jedi and the Strategic Politicization of Pop Culture Through Access Media Manipulation. But Brian Lowry is not going to let those pesky little facts get in the way of forging ahead with his narrative. That's troubling to the extent it's true. Well, it isn't true, but it's not going to stop you. But it only stokes the sense that abusive quadrants of toxic media, fandom, don't speak with one coherent voice, can't be modified, and there's not much sense in trying. You could actually take this entire article and just replace the word fandom or toxic fans with media or toxic media, and it would be much more applicable. That hasn't been the prevailing mentality among movie studios and TV networks, which court fans, seeking to turn them into ambassadors who will fuel passion for their properties, translating into sales of tickets and merchandise. Brian, the companies don't turn these fans into ambassadors. They've always been that. And what's happened is these companies have taken over the franchises that these fans were ambassadors of and turned it into something they don't recognize, and they feel betrayed. Disney has been especially adept in this regard, creating its own fan expo D23, populated by talent from its movies and shows, mirroring massive gatherings devoted to all things pop culture at Comic-Con in San Diego and similar events. Maintaining a dialogue with fans is perceived as being a good business strategy. Well, it certainly is, unless you're Rian Johnson. Talent, including actors and directors, also use platforms like Twitter to speak directly to the fan bases, bypassing the traditional public relations filters. Oh, Brian, you're so 20th century. The situation, however, has created problems for directors like Johnson and Last Jedi co-star Kelly Marie Tran, who was forced off of social media by the misogynist and hateful responses she received. Hard stop right there. Let's backtrack a little bit. That situation, however, has created problems for directors like Rian Johnson. Was it the situation's fault, or did Rian Johnson create that situation by projecting on others his man-babiness? As far as the Kelly Marie Tran situation goes, I'm going to link to you in the description an Itchy Baka video which goes over it, which might provide some context, but I talked about it in my last video. But I will give you this audio from Good Morning America that I found through Data Racer 117.
I've been to therapy.
You went to therapy.
Highly recommend.
Because of the bullying online.
And also just like the transition of what it was like. You know, I very much was someone working a day job, struggling to be an actor, and then suddenly was in Star Wars. I think that sort of transition takes a lot of emotional work, if that makes sense.
Now you can watch the video on Data Racer's tweet, and I agree with his assessment. Kelly Marie Tran told GMA she had to go to therapy after being in Star Wars. When asked if it was because of bullying online, she avoids eye contact, pauses, stutters, and quickly pivots the topic away from her. Unlike the Access Media, I'm not going to rehash my thoughts on the Kelly Marie Tran situation. I will tell you this, stating the obvious. They keep trying to bring this argument up to try to apply something to the Fandom Menace that doesn't exist. None of us have a problem with people of color, and none of us have a problem with women in Star Wars. Next, back to Rian Johnson. Johnson attributes the ugliest elements to a few bad apples, defending the wider fan base and warning against generalizing based on that. On social media, a few unhealthy people can cast a big shadow on the wall, but over the past 4 years, I've met lots of real, fellow Star Wars fans. Oh, I'm sure you're a fellow Star Wars fan, Rianne. Nice work with Luke Skywalker, bud. He wrote at the time, "We like and dislike stuff, but we do it with humor, love, and respect. We do it with humor as well, and sarcasm, and as far as respect is concerned, well, that's a two-way street. I might start respecting some of the repurposers over at Disney Star Wars when they start respecting the fans, but that is something that has to be earned, and Rianne Johnson is a long way from that." Yet, as Wired senior editor Angela Watercutter noted after her own run-in with trolls, when some of those participating in a conversation, real or digitally concocted, are seemingly there just to stoke discord, when it's impossible to know which sentiments are real and what motivates the people sharing them. Discourse crumbles. What could have possibly sparked Angela's run-in with trolls? Let's go over to her article. Star Wars: The Last Jedi, Russian Trolls, and the Disintegration of Discourse. A new study finds half of the negative tweets about the film were likely politically motivated or not even human. And guess what? Angela writes an entire article without even bringing up the sample size used, which was 1,273 tweets to Rianne Johnson, and that all-important number 16 tweets, because this entire narrative, again, was built on 16 tweets. And this is the senior editor of Wired magazine. So what's more likely? Did Angela get trolled, or did she receive criticisms of her arguments? And maybe she's just concocting this digitally concocted conversation. The release of another Star Wars movie is always an occasion, and it will be on YouTube, but that would be subverting Disney's expectations. One destined to create strong opinions, pro and con. Fans also have avenues to exult or vent publicly in ways that were scarcely imaginable when the first movie premiered in 1977, and Disney wants to keep them in a buying mood. I love when the mainstream media presents a case like this. They do it as if they are separated from the situation and not part of the problem, which they are. Certainly, Disney Star Wars politicized this franchise by bringing in identity politics, and they got the fans out of a buying mood, and they really had to work, because we are talking about Star Wars fans here. The rise of trolls, oh so clever, however, hovers over the Fall of Skywalker, and given the difficulty separating conventional heartfelt griping from bad faith trolling, the best advice might come from another memorable science fiction movie franchise, remembering that in space, no one can hear you scream. As far as trolling is concerned, let's recap some of the language used in this article towards Star Wars fans. Absurdly ugly, lashing out in ways that exhibit a loss of perspective, tragically synonymous with hate and bigotry, abusive quadrants of fandom, misogynistic, hateful, unhealthy people, and of course trolls, which was used in the headline. What a beautifully, lovingly crafted piece by Brian Lowry from CNN. I'm sure that's going to heal the fandom and help things progress. In the meantime, the Disney Star Wars blame game and the Disney Star Wars spin continues. I don't believe in coincidences, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the Kelly Marie Tran debate was brought up out of storage, and then she gave an interview on Disney-owned ABC's Good Morning America. And let's not forget that the original source for the Russian troll narrative was Lucasfilm. And the only thing Brian Lowry accomplished with this article was adding a few more members to the Fandom Menace. Well done, sir. The Fandom Menace has had a hell of a week, and this article played like the Access Media's greatest hits, and they will keep coming. The day this video releases will be the day after the premiere of The Fall of Skywalker, and we will have heard from the blue check marks on Twitter. We will hear from the real people on the 19th, including yours truly. I will be live streaming at 10:30 p.m. Pacific time after I see The Rise of Palpatine. Be sure to tune in. Everybody have a great day. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.
Nerdrotic.com. Please subscribe.